For 30 years, the Son of God lived a life that looked completely ordinary. No crowds, no miracles, no sermons, just dust, family, work, and waiting. The Bible gives us only one detailed scene from those hidden years. 12-year-old Jesus staying behind in the temple while his parents head home from Passover. They find him days later, sitting among the teachers, listening, asking questions, and giving answers that leave everyone amazed. When they finally drag him back to Nazareth, Luke says something most of us skip past. He went home, obeyed his parents, and grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. That is the summary of almost 3 decades. No highlight reel, just growth, obedience, and favor in a tiny village most of the world ignored. Nazareth in the first century was small, probably only a few hundred people tucked into the hills of Galilee. Archaeology shows simple stone houses partly carved into the hillside, with packed earth floors, flat mud and straw roofs, and single rooms that served for cooking, eating, sleeping, and work. Families stored grain, oil, and dried fish in big jars along the walls, cooked over open fires, and slept on mats they could roll up during the day. This is the world Jesus grew up in. He grew up in a real family, too. The Gospels mention 4 brothers by name, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas, and say he also had sisters. Whatever view someone takes about Mary's later life, the most natural reading is that Jesus spent his youth in a crowded household as the eldest son, sharing chores, meals, and responsibilities. His parents were devout. Luke tells us they went up to Jerusalem every year for the Passover festival, and they brought Jesus with him when he was 12. That was not a cheap or easy trip for a Galilean family, but they did it anyway. Week after week, his life would have been shaped by synagogue gatherings, Sabbath rest, the reading of Torah, and the rhythm of Israel's festivals. Religious life was not a separate church compartment for one day a week. It ran straight through daily work, meals, and decisions. From his teens into his 20s, Jesus worked. When he finally comes back to Nazareth as a teacher, the locals say, "Isn't this the tekton?" The word our Bibles usually translate carpenter. Scholars point out that tekton is a general term for a builder or craftsman who might work with wood, stone, or both, tied to the building trades more broadly than just furniture making. One historian notes that men like this were often day laborers doing basic construction work, a step below landowning peasants on the social ladder. So, for roughly 20 years, far longer than his public ministry, Jesus likely spent his days cutting stone, shaping beams, repairing houses, and taking small jobs to help support his family. The growing city of Sepphoris, no more than a few miles from Nazareth, was a major building site in those years, and it is historically plausible that craftsmen from Nazareth walked there for work. We cannot prove he did, but if you picture him walking dusty roads with tools over his shoulder to work on construction projects under Roman rule, you are probably not far from reality. He would have known what it felt like to come home tired as the sun went down, hands raw from stone and wood, clothes smelling of sweat and dust. He would have dealt with customers who did not pay on time, with projects that went wrong, with economic pressure when work was scarce. In other words, he lived the same kind of blue-collar grind most of the world lives, long before he ever preached about taking up a cross. And in all of that, Luke says he was obedient to his earthly parents and kept growing in wisdom, stature, and favor with God and people. That obedience to the 5th commandment, honoring father and mother, was part of the perfect righteousness he was quietly building long before anyone called him rabbi. So, what did Jesus do for 30 years? He learned the scriptures in synagogue and at home. He prayed the prayers of his people. He celebrated Passover, Sabbaths, and feast days.
He fetched water, helped his mother, looked after younger siblings. He worked as a village builder in a poor, overlooked corner of an occupied land. He listened, watched, and waited. He grew. And God chose to spend the vast majority of his earthly life right there, in the hidden years, where nothing looked impressive from the outside. That's the part that should hit you. If you feel like your life is stuck in small routines and invisible faithfulness, the story of Jesus' first 30 years says those years are not wasted. They are the place where character is forged, where obedience becomes muscle memory, where favor is built in quiet, unreported ways. Before he carried a cross in front of crowds, he carried beams of wood for other people's houses. Before anyone followed him as Lord, he followed his parents' home and learned to submit. God was not late starting the story. He was preparing it. And if you're in a long, quiet season that feels small and unseen, you might be closer to walking in your purpose than you think.